All right, so if I had to summarize this episode in a single sentence, I would say that this is the episode that House of the Dragon just artificially flips a switch for not just the plot, but the characters in whole. This is House of the Dragon, Season 3, Episode 8, the Season 3 finale. This is the raw take. This is my unfiltered, unscripted first impressions of the episode, and I'm about a day late. So when I say that this show feels like it artificially flipped a switch, it all starts at the very beginning of this episode with Rhaenyra when she learns that Aegon has risen. He's been resurrected. He seems to be the second coming. He is the prince who was promised. And this throws her into a whirlwind of emotions and ultimately leads her to where I think she probably should have been after Jace died, and that is she is becoming Rhaenyra the Cruel. And you see this demonstrated with her interactions with Heleana. You see it demonstrated with her interactions with Baela, and it's great. This is kind of the version of Rhaenyra I expected to get for the entirety of Season 3 after Jace dies, because at that point, the stakes have been established. Her sacrifices have been established. It's all about maintaining her rule as queen because she's trying to fulfill this prophecy. And that suddenly becomes the most important thing to her in this episode. There's nothing about being diplomatic any longer. This is her having enough. You stack up all the things that have gone against her. Even if you go back to Season 1, the accusations of her being a whore or her children being bastards, you add it all up and you go through Season 2, the devastation of losing Lucerys, the devastation of losing Jace at the beginning of this season. And she kind of just screws up the dynamic of being the leader throughout the entirety of this season. She makes really awkward choices. She trusts people she doesn't know. If you look at her small council, it's full of strangers. The only person she can depend on, or at least predict who they are, would be Daemon, her husband, her uncle, somebody she's known from the very beginning. And the show has manufactured this idea that for whatever reason, Rhaenyra would be divided on where Daemon stands because maybe he hasn't proven himself to her yet. But at the end, establishing that he's aligned the River Lords and the Winter Wolves, right, the Northmen, all for her cause, all in favor of pursuing her cause. She knows that information. There is no dilemma of she's got the evil on one side with Daemon, and then she's got the moral compass, Mysaria, on her other side, which Mysaria being the moral compass for Rhaenyra is absolutely absurd. I think we have to all see how that doesn't really play itself out in the show, but the actress inside the episode, after episode 8, stated that that's how they interpreted the material. That's how it was presented to them, is that Mysaria is Rhaenyra's moral compass, and I just think that's kind of absurd. And it's also inconsistent when you think about the character Mysaria. Think about something that Mysaria does. She creates this idea of putting Tormund Manderly in the position of Master of Coin, right? So he's there to basically rule over the economic system for Westeros, and they're broke, and the small folk in King's Landing are starving. And Mysaria, this is her idea. This is her plan that he can be the scapegoat. Instead of genuinely caring about the small folk, instead, she is only looking to make certain that Rhaenyra is not looked on unfavorably by the small folk. So in a way, she's manipulating the small folk, who she supposedly is there to represent. I don't know how that translates to her being Rhaenyra's moral compass. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Just like her being fired for what? Being more, they present it as if Rhaenyra had to make a choice between Daemon and Mysaria, as if Mysaria was somehow the lesser of the two evils, and I just don't think that's the case at all. If you listen to Daemon, what he wants, ultimately his ambitions are probably a little bit more dramatic, but what he wants, or the way he would want to go about doing it, is a far more logical plan to success than the diplomacy that they've been trying to do this entire time. If you think about it, the diplomatic approach is what led them to the Dance of the Dragons to begin with. By not taking a harsh stance, by not taking the crown by force, by not showing the force of the dragon, fire and blood, from the outset, it allowed this conflict to brew and kind of pour over and last maybe a little bit longer than it should. Once she takes King's Landing, things have almost got to be a harsh takeover, because not a hostile takeover, which is what I'm about to say, but it's got to be kind of harsh, because at the end of the day, you've got to get these people in line. As long as they think that there's other claimants, there's always going to be a challenge. Unfortunately, that's just the way that this world is set up, and Damon's the only person that seems to understand that Daron must go. Aemond, if he's still alive, he needs to be found. He must be destroyed because he's another claimant. He's another threat. Either you take the prophecy seriously or you don't. So this whole time that we see her here in episode 8, she's taken the prophecy incredibly seriously. But that also suggests that maybe up until this point, maybe she wasn't. And that's what I mean by the switch being flipped. It just happened so suddenly that all of a sudden now that Aegon has risen, now it's a problem. But because of this switch, there's things that happen in this episode that kind of feel like they come out of nowhere. Specifically, her attitude towards the Faith of the Seven, and having Alan kill the High Septon, I think is just totally unearned. And for Alan of Hall, I don't know what purpose that serves his character. If you really think about, what is his arc, I don't think we really know, because we definitely get a lot of screen time for him, and a lot of it early on in season 2 and moving forward, it's about his legitimacy and his ties to Corlys, with Corlys being his father, but he's a bastard, and an unclaimed bastard at that. So then we get into season 3, where Corlys has claimed both he and Adam, but Rhaenyra has rejected that. And yet Alan seems to be totally on board with Rhaenyra, even with his own brother Adam pointing out, hey, there's some red flags here. Like, Corlys, our father, has been taken hostage in Tumbleton, which is another point I want to get to. Hopefully I touch on everything I got here in my notes. But Alan seems to be suddenly in this trance, or somehow manipulated by Rhaenyra, who I don't think has demonstrated any tools to manipulate anybody. If anything, she's just been this person that has kind of been stuck sitting still while the war happens around her. She doesn't even feel like an active participant in the small council. It just seems like everybody else's ideas, and the only idea that I've seen Rhaenyra actually have is to send Alicent to Harrenhal. And, if you watch any of my other 2 videos, I'm sure you've seen that I don't think that made a whole lot of sense. So I just feel like this sudden turn was really bizarre, and her screaming High Valyrian at the small folk who don't know what the hell she's talking about. It all just, I get it. She's at this breaking point. It just seems that, and I'm not the only person to say this, I've heard other people suggest this, that, there's this slow buildup, and maybe that's irritating for the audience, but to have it just suddenly flip, like this slow, okay, now 100, no, 1,000, no, actually 1,000,000. We are full-fledged, she's Rhaenyra the Cruel now. And it just felt like you were going for this slow, organic turn, which could definitely frustrate your audience. And maybe you pick the pace up a little bit, but it doesn't just pick up the pace, it just flips. And that slow burn feels like a kind of like a waste. It doesn't feel like that slow burn earned this switch. It just feels like they were stalling, and then they got to a place where they really had to rush. And that felt more like a procrastination than character development, at least to me. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I do want to touch on Heleana really quick, because if you go back and you look at George R. R. Martin's blog post that was ultimately taken down, one of the main areas of criticism that he had was not giving Heleana the Sophie's choice, not giving her Maelor. And then Maelor is ultimately killed after Jaehaerys is killed. And this is what turns Heleana into this just super depressed mess. She already was, but then when Maelor is killed, that ultimately is the thing that she can't recover from. Here's the son that she had to choose between Maelor or Jaehaerys, and she ultimately chose Maelor for death, for reasons that kind of make sense. He's younger, and maybe it's because Jaehaerys is the actual heir to Aegon, but ultimately Blood and Cheese killed Jaehaerys, and now she's left with this guilt. After that choice that she made, she chose Maelor for death, and then he's the one that survived. So there's a lot of guilt. And in the books, Alicent has to take on the role of looking after her daughter Jaehaera and her son Maelor. And then when they try to sneak Maelor out of the city, there's an angry mob, there's riots, and he's torn apart by the small folk. It's really brutal and it's very devastating. And then that also ties into Daron, because there's a scene where he has the opportunity to offer mercy, but because of what happened to Maelor, he doesn't grant that mercy. And that plays into his character development before they get to Tumbleton. And, they just kind of skipped a lot of stuff here that I don't really know the reasoning for that. But with Heleana, though, in House of the Dragon, I'm not saying that the book necessarily is a better portrayal of the character or that House of the Dragon is a better portrayal, but I will say what they've done with her, or her presentation. The moments with her on the screen, I think, worked a little bit better than they do in the book. It just doesn't have maybe the same payoff or the same impact on the bigger story. Helena's death is an influence for the small folk who she's beloved by. They love her. And when she dies, they accuse Rhaenyra of shoving her from the window or having her thrown from the window. And that kind of characterizes the events that follow a little bit differently. So I don't know if they're going to still lean into that. It'd be hard to do that because we don't actually have a perspective of the small folk in House of the Dragon that much anymore. With Hugh Hammer and Ulf the White, joining Rhaenyra, and then now they're at Tumbleton, and we're just not getting on the ground perspective from King's Landing. We don't know what's happening with the small folk. And I think maybe it's almost too late, and there's a big moment that should be happening in season 4. And granted, they could easily change it. They've changed a lot. But if we get to season 4 and the small folk take on the role that they do in the book, and we don't really have a developed perspective at the ground floor, I think we're going to miss it. And what I think is ultimately going to happen is they're going to force Massaria into that position where we're watching from Massaria's perspective. And I think there's a lot of book fans that are going to be pretty upset about that, because if we're watching it from her perspective, what is her role? She's got to have she can't just be our eyes on the small folk. She'd be taking on some sort of plot-driven reason for being there. And that plot-driven reason for being there probably means that she's replacing another character from the book. And if you read the book, I think you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to spoil anything if anybody hasn't read the book, but I'm sure book readers know what I'm talking about. And I think you know what I'm talking about when I say the small folk play a role and where that leads. And it's devastating to the story, but it's you could argue the whole point of the story, really. So it's very important. And switching that character around, I think there's a lot of book purists who are going to be upset about it. I don't know how I feel about it just yet. Not great. But yeah, Helena's death, people saying that there was nothing that provoked her death, or provoked her suicide. I don't think that that's true. I think that we had plenty of buildup, maybe not plenty, but we have logical buildup to her ending her own life and jumping out of that window. Is that necessarily what George R. R. Martin was saying when he was talking about toxic butterflies? I don't think so. I think that he was using that almost as as a prologue to move into his bigger issues with House of the Dragon. But we'll never know, because he took that original blog post down where he criticized House of the Dragon. So I'm not sure where we're going to go from here. And if you guys if you're not into the books and you're not watching this unfold between George R. R. Martin and the showrunners, I'm sorry for boring you. Let's get back into what happens here in the show. Aemon and Alice at Harrenhal. Really strange for me that there's not much acknowledgement of Alicent. This seems like something that Aemon should be pretty devastated by. He seems to be having this whole self-reflection attitude while he's in Harrenhal. And I think he contemplates about whether or not it was the right thing to attack Aegon, or maybe there's some regret there. But then what has gone on? Why does he even think that Alicent would try to poison him? What are his thoughts on this? And instead, the scenes with Aemon and Alice really focus on Alice and her history and her being, or at least claiming to be, the widow of Harren the Black, the king who ultimately ruled Harrenhal and was ruled the Isles and the Riverlands, and then he was ultimately burned and killed. That castle was destroyed by Aegon the Conqueror, and Balerion the Black Dread, and that she had a child who was injured and she lost him. And it sounds like maybe she tried to end her own life or something like that, and she couldn't, and she took on this curse. That's what it sounds like to me. I mean, tell me what you guys think she was saying there in the comments section if you've got a different interpretation. But I thought that was actually kind of neat, kind of kind of cool. And I thought it would have been a really good area for them to do like a maybe a more tasteful flashback, nothing too heavy, no more than like maybe 20 or 30 seconds. And we maybe got some vague imagery of Balerion and Aegon the Conqueror flying over Harrenhal. That I think that could have been really cool. And then you see Alice in that flashback in those times with Balerion the Black Dread, with Aegon 1, and I think that would have been really cool. But I don't know. These guys are the professionals that make House of the Dragon, and I'm just some anonymous voice that you're listening to here on YouTube. So, my opinion doesn't really matter. I thought it would have been kind of a neat thing to add in there. One last note here. I guess this really probably should have gone to something else when I was talking about Rhaenyra. Joffrey is awake. He's moving. He can walk. He can stand upright, which is good. No talking scenes. Actually, just kind of weird. Really weird. I thought there would be some sort of emotional break, some sort of moment between Rhaenyra and Joffrey, and there just wasn't. I believe she tells him the prophecy of A Song of Ice and Fire there in the carriage on her way to the Sept of Baelor, or not the Sept of Baelor. Where is that they go? Oh well, it's not the Sept of Baelor, right? Baelor is after the Dance of the Dragons. I don't know, the Great Sept, whatever. Maybe I'm getting mixed up, guys. I don't know. I haven't looked over Fire and Blood here for a little while, so correct my chronological dismay here, or disorientation. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So she tells him about the prince that was promised in the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy, I assume, but they threw him in there. I don't know where that really goes. It doesn't seem like it goes anywhere, so I don't know. Neat. Hopefully it goes somewhere next season, but do we really have time for that? I don't know, because there's two other kids who are very important moving forward in the future. After the events of the Dance of the Dragons, we'll see what happens. I've got this note on my notepad here, and it just says Gwaine is fucking stupid. I don't know why I wrote it like that. I love Gwaine Hightower. I think he's a great character, and he brings like a certain charm and just a reasonable guy in the room, somebody that you want, like kind of to cool the temperature of the room if things get out of hand. But his idea, or Daron's idea, it just feels so like, of course that happened. Why did they kidnap Corlys? We don't know. Well, I mean, we really don't know why they took Corlys. It seems to have had no influence over their plans when they were being attacked. It was not an opportunity to seize fire or anything like that, because like if you look at Gwaine and Daron's idea, this totally goes against what Ormond wanted to do. So why they're trying to trade Corlys for peace, it just feels like a contrived way to get Corlys back over to Daemon and back over to the Blacks. It just doesn't seem. Just why was he kidnapped? What did that do? What did they accomplish? Not only that, it seems that they never really talk about it in King's Landing either. Rhaenyra and her council never discuss it. Obviously, she has that moment with Baela, which is actually a really good scene. Insolent child. I don't know, something about her delivery with that line where she called Baela an insolent child. I thought that was great. I don't know, little moments. There's always like these little subtle moments in dialogue that I'm like, oh, that was good delivery. I like that. Anyway, Corlys is at Tumbleton for no reason. It doesn't serve much of a purpose. So they forced this scene in here that also doesn't seem to serve much of a purpose other than to get Corlys out of Tumbleton and away from the Greens. That's where that went. That's where Corlys being kidnapped. Think about that, you guys. When you're defending this show as one of the greatest things ever and you think it's infallible, think about stuff like this and just be like, you know what? Maybe some of the people that don't think this is the greatest thing ever, maybe they got a point, because that makes no sense. I don't like empty plot points. I don't know why you do if you're defending that. It's an empty plot point. Let's not have that. We don't have to have that. I don't know. Daron, hold on. But Gwaine and Daemon freaked me out there, where I'm like, oh man, like you have these moments where certain characters, and Damon does this the most, where everybody around him, no matter how well they think they know him, all of a sudden he's like, no, I am a Targaryen, which means I am unhinged. I am not like any of you. None of you are like me. I am a dragon rider. I am a Targaryen. I am superior. And it's kind of messed up, right? This elitist mentality, this, this belief of being a superior race, pretty intense. And, it's just that there's this insanity about Daemon when he's choking Gwaine that, as far as that moment, and if you really want to vilify Daemon, like these are the moments to do it because the guy is unhinged, and I really appreciated seeing that on screen. But yeah, I was about to say Daron just doesn't really, what did he do all season? I just, oh man, Ormond's mean, and I'm not mean. I'm actually a better person than I am when I'm with Ormond. If only I had the chance, and he just doesn't do anything. I cannot believe we didn't see Daron and Tessarion, his dragon, in action. Daron takes no action in this entire season, and we don't have many episodes left for season 4. Like season 4 looks like it's going to be just a nightmare. It's going to be a messy nightmare, and it might be a lot of fun, but it's going to be messy. There are so many plot points that they have got to wrap up, and HBO's only given them 8 episodes. I don't know how they're going to get this done. I mean, I wanted to see more out of Daron, but I kind of thought for sure they would just go ahead and kill him off, just like they killed off Ormond. I thought both of them deserved to be on the show a lot longer, and with it being shortened seasons, and the show only going 4 seasons, I thought for sure they needed to be introduced earlier into the show. Instead, they kind of feel a little bit empty, and there's no need for it. Like, we've got limited episodes, and somehow this show is cutting material from the book, and yet the show still feels like it's dragging, or it has filler episodes, and the characters are stagnant, and they're not really doing a whole lot. I don't know. Disappointed with Daron this season. I really wanted to see him get into action. I'm disappointed in Ormond. I thought him dying the way that he did with that silly, sensitivity to scent gimmick. They just turned that into such a cartoonish part of his character that they didn't really seem to take it seriously, other than to make it this awkward, funny way that he dies. And I didn't think there was anything funny about that at all. I didn't think that was humorous. I didn't think Roderick Dustin stabbing Ormond in the ass and telling him, this is a proper fucking from the north. Like, what is that? Who are we as an audience if we, oh man, like that was great. That was peak Game of Thrones. What is it that you're enjoying about that? What kind of symbolic nature did you think that was? Oh, because they suggest that maybe Ormond might be a closeted homosexual. Wouldn't it be funny if he gets stabbed in his ass? All right, I don't know. Are you guys like 8 years old? Doesn't move the needle for me, but maybe I'm too old for that. I'm not sure. Aegon and Aemond reunite. I thought that was pretty stupid, actually. But you wouldn't know it by watching the scene, because I think Tom Glencarney can almost do no wrong in this show. Other than that one line, I'm not the only one that thinks this, that I'm alive. I don't know what that was. I would have just liked to have that played down, just that resentment. But I love that he kind of takes charge there in that moment. Like, this is what we're going to do. Here's the plan. Let's go Team Green on 3. 1, 2, 3. Team Green. That's kind of what happened. I can talk about the dynamic between Aegon and Aemond a little bit, but I'm kind of confused on really what's even going on with Aemond. We spend so much time with Aemond, and just like last season with Daemon and Harrenhal, and not a whole lot's actually being accomplished there, because whatever we thought we learned about Daemon last season doesn't seem like it really matters this season, does it? I don't know. You tell me what changed for Daemon and Harrenhal, which makes me feel like, well, in season 4, Aemond, everything that we learned about him there in Harrenhal, maybe that won't matter. Hopefully it does, because of what I believe the ending will be for both Aemond and Daemon. You would like to think that their time in Harrenhal was very impactful. We'll see. Dragon Seeds, Ulf and Hugh Hammer betray. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Ulf betrays the Blacks. Hugh runs in looking for Kat, his wife, and I just really felt like he needed to be a real participant. A lot of people have brought this up, but why are there so many times where these dragon riders are not on their dragons? Okay, like so that we can have these contrived, battle sequences. Like the idea of Damon being beaten up by John Roxton. Like, I don't think that works for me. Plot wise, why I don't like these moments. Like Roderick Dustin and Ormond, right? I understand how things play out in the book, but it's not really characterized well there either. So like, why don't we flesh this out? What is it that makes Roderick so determined to be the one that gets Ormond? What's that about? I don't understand. And why do they all want to die? Why do the Winter Wolves, what's behind that? Why are we so determined to die? Why did you come here to die? Maybe a little bit of background. And if we had more seasons, more episodes, we could flesh that out a little bit more, I guess. God, I'm really mixed on this episode, because when I was watching it was really a lot better as I was watching it. And then the more I think about it, the less it makes sense. Ulf being able to sneak in and out of Tumbleton, no big deal. Hugh, showing up on his dragon, running into Tumbleton in the middle of a war, yelling for his wife. I mean, I don't know. Felt like that's a character we should have spent more time with. Seems like he had more stakes in this than just about anyone. And we spent no time with him. And I feel like that's a totally missed opportunity. But, we've narrowed this to 8 episodes per season, and I think we are missing a lot. Again, they're cutting a lot of things from the books, and yet the show feels like it's dragging and it needs to pick up the pace. And I don't know how House of the Dragon has accomplished both those things. The source material is incredibly thin, right? But there are major beats within the story, right? There's major bullet point moments. And somehow we're changing those or cutting them all together, and yet the show still feels like it's dragging, and then it gets to these points where everything feels rushed. There's a major pacing issue here where, you don't know how to maintain that same level of engagement throughout the entirety of the season. And I think there's a better way to do that. When you binge watch the show, this stuff's not going to jump out to you as much, but when you're going week to week and you're watching each episode, you realize like, man, this really didn't get anywhere, and then it gave me just enough to want me to come back, but only just enough. I didn't have a good time with the episode, but it gave me that one thing that hooked me to come back for next week. But other than that, I didn't have a good time with this episode, and a lot of it was forgettable, or unneeded. Maybe it's not forgettable, but it is unneeded. I think they've got enough material to work with to make each episode feel like it can offer something, that it can hit a little bit harder. And then you'd have these bigger moments that really raise the stakes, like the Battle of Tumbleton. All right, guys, I need to actually write this stuff all down. I need to go over these episodes again. I want to go over the final episode and put out a proper review. I would like to have that out here in a couple days. If you took the time to listen to this, I really appreciate you. You are a champion. A lot of stutters, a lot of ums, and not really sure what to think here, and spacing out, and awkward silences. So I appreciate anybody that listens to these types of videos that I make all the way through. And if you did, leave the video a like. I would really appreciate any support. I love you guys for commenting. I love you guys for watching. We got plenty more to talk about. I know the season is over, but I think we've got a lot of material here to talk about for a long time. At least to last us until A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and then season 2 for A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and then House of the Dragon. Season 4 will be here before you know it. I don't know, some of you started watching this show in your early 30s, and you'll be in your 40s by the time you get to season 4. And I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry if you just now thought about that, and I'm the one that pointed it out to you. Sorry, I just wanted to end this video on a happy note. So that just came to mind. All right, guys, I'll talk to you soon.